Boys and girls, good morning. Hey, I've got a big word. See if anyone knows what it means. Hygiene. What does it mean? It means to keep yourself clean. What are some ways you can keep yourself clean? Take a shower. Take a bath. Brushing your teeth. Wash your hands. Change your clothes every day. Once in a while. Sanitize your hands. You know, we are in a society today that is like everybody's freaking out about hygiene. So here's some things they tell you not to do. Don't touch your face. Keep your hands out of your mouth and don't touch your lips. The next one I won't do. Don't pick your nose. When you sneeze, how are you supposed to do it?
Chicken wing.
Okay, in your elbow or in your shirt? You still tell me to get on your hand? Your elbow. You know, that's tough. So if you're going to that's you. Do it in your elbow. What else can you do? When you get tired, go to bed. Be rested. Don't be really super tired. Go to the bathroom, then wash your hands. Okay? Wash your hands before you eat. How should you wash your hands? With soap. Wash it with soap for 7 minutes. 7 minutes is a long time. But I wanted to talk to you about how long you're supposed to wash your hands. So I brought, guess what I brought? Check this box out. I won't tell you who gave it to me because it's his color there. But bar soap. Doesn't matter if it smells or not. This is a Dove soap. But when you wash it, what are you supposed to do with it? Get it wet first. Put it on your hands, front, back. How long are you supposed to rub your hands? Okay, we got 6 minutes, 7 minutes, 30 seconds. How much? Twice? I thought it was once. Okay, I had someone said 20 minutes. All right, here goes. I had someone back here say you're supposed to sing happy birthday while you wash your hands twice. That's 40 seconds. Here's what I'm going to recommend. You sing Jesus Loves Me at least once. Okay, so here we're going to go. We're going to do this. You got it? Ready? I want you to rub your hands while I sing. Okay? And you can sing with me too. Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. Both sides. Little ones to him belong. They are weak, but he is strong. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so. Okay, that's 25 seconds. Okay? But that's better than what I normally do. I tried to time it, but it didn't start when I did it. But, you know, I'm not very, 25 seconds is a long time. I actually saw someone where they put like a teacher, she stamped their hands with like a, rubber stamp. And she said, during the day, I want you to wash them enough that washes off. So that kind of gives you an idea of how long you're supposed to wash. But you know what? God tells us to wash our hands. I thought it was interesting. That last song you sang, it said, wash your eyes. I was like, okay, don't try that at all.
But
I do want you to wash your hands. You ever get soap in your eyes? It hurts. All right, here goes. chapter 4, verse 8 says, come near to God. What does that mean? It says, seek God. So you're here today at church, so you're coming near to God. And if you come near to God, He will come near to you. So when you come near to God, He wants to meet you. And He will come near to you. It says, wash your hands, you sinners. Hey? I think we're all sinners. So he said, wash your hands, make your hearts pure, you who can't make up your minds. So he's talking to someone who's struggling on which way to go, and he says, wash your hands, wash your minds. Now here's what's interesting with wash your hands. He's not talking about physically washing your hands. He might be today. But he's saying, spiritually, you need to have clean hands and a clean heart. And what that means is, don't do things that are wrong with your hands, and don't think things that are wrong with your heart. He says, I want you to be pure. I want you to love me. I want you to draw near to me. Are we going to do things that are wrong? No! We will. Okay? We don't want to, but we will. And when you do, just remember, God says, I love you and I want to forgive you. Repent, confess, turn to me, draw near to me, and I will draw near to you. All right? So be safe. Wash your hands. Don't pick your nose. Okay? Gross. Don't touch your face. Don't touch your lips. Just be careful. Okay? Don't be afraid. Love the Lord. Seek Him. Let's pray. Father, I just thank you for hygiene, Lord, where we can be somewhat clean. Lord, I know through the ages that washing actually helps with bacteria and stuff. But Lord, help us not to be fearful of living our lives. Father, help us to trust you. And help us to do things that we can do to help protect ourselves and protect others. Father, I just pray your blessings upon these kids. And Father, thank you for the song that says, you love us. All the little boys and girls. For the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Ted. It's good to see everybody here this morning. I'm going to end up talking a little bit to the choir since you're here. But you know, I was down in Phoenix yesterday. I was celebrating my sister Teresa. It was her 50th birthday party. So it was just a really big celebration. And many of you might know my sister's adopted. So she through Ancestors.com or one of those websites, she found her biological family. And so they were able to come to the party. It was a great time for us to meet them to meet us. It was wonderful. But while I was there, I was kind of talking around with what's going on in the valley. And the church where I used to be the youth pastor in Phoenix, they're not meeting together for service. They're having their services online. And then my cousins they chimed in and said, yeah, we're not having services either tomorrow. And I found out churches all across the valley. Then I started listening to news, and churches all across the country are not having services, gathering together for their services. They're staying home, and they're streaming everything online. And me personally, selfishly speaking, I am taking into consideration that if we did that, and I said, you know, you could just listen to me online on Facebook or something, the number of people that would listen to me versus, you know, you got David Jeremiah or Chuck Swindoll. I'm not sure how to win that contest. So I am glad that you're here. But it did inspire me to do a little bit of research on my own, just as I'm trying to be a responsible pastor in the community today. And I started looking at some CDC, Center for Disease Control stats. And do you know how many people died from the flu last year? A little over 34,000 people died from the flu. 2 years ago, 61,000 people died. And this is just America. I'm sorry. These are American stats. 2 years ago, just in America, 61,000 people died from the flu 2 years ago. 3 years ago, it was 38,000. I was looking up some stats last night for how many people in the whole world, out of a population of 7 billion, have died so far that they know of from the, am I saying it right, COVID-19 virus. How many people have died so far in the whole world? Less than 6,000. So, Fred, are you saying that we should be scared of the COVID-19 virus? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we should live every moment of every day absolutely petrified of the flu. My word! 2010, 17,000 people died just from one strain of the flu, the H1N1. Remember that? Oh, what? We should stop having church all the time. Forget ever going to another potluck. I want that communication center shut down. We are never going to serve another cookie or another cup of coffee. We're never going on vacation. We're never going to send our kid to school. How irresponsible is that? Forget ever having to start going to college. And I am not going to have face-to-face contact with you anymore. No more ministry, no more fellowship. How many germs are out there just waiting to kill us all? Fred, am I detecting sarcasm? Yes, you are. It's actually oozing out of my pores. Christians, why should we ever live in fear of anything? Now, I do not want to undo common sense. Absolutely, everything Ted said. Wash your hands. You know, if you're sick with something, don't go to work. Don't go to church. Don't go to school. If you have an immunocompromised system, like my mom does, you know, when the flu season heats up, or I see people around with a lot of colds or something, there's just a lot of coughing and sneezing, I'm like, Mom, you probably either should come to church with a mask or don't come to church at all. Go ahead and stay away. You know, be careful about how much you shake hands with people if you're dealing with a sniffle or a cough. I'm dealing with a sniffle or a cough. I'm not shaking hands a lot today. I'm a little suspicious of the origin of mine because mine flared up right about the time everything started blooming. I'm remembering, oh wait, yeah, I get sick every year about this time. But I'm just not absolutely sure, so I'm not really going around doing a lot of touchy-feely stuff today because I want to keep it to myself. I won't be shaking hands. So yeah, I'm not telling you don't use your brain, but I am saying if your God isn't big enough to protect you from this little virus, that for the vast majority of people it acts like a cold for 5 days, well, there sure are a whole lot of other things that you should be absolutely petrified of too. Because there are so many other more dangerous things out there just waiting to kill you. On the other hand, what if we did just decide, my God is big enough to handle this? Amen. It's either you be fearing God, or you're going to be fearing everything else. You know, he actually gave us some Bible verses, some statistics of his own to help us, because if we think about it for just a moment, we have a reason to hide under the couch. For example, did I ever tell you what actually killed my dad? Did I ever share this with you? He had an immunocompromised system. Lots of health decisions he made in his life that made it to where he just wasn't really strong in his older years. But what actually killed him was this bacteria he picked up in Winslow soil or Winslow water. They're not sure. It's one or the other. It's something that I don't know, he could have been pulling weeds one day and got it. And it ended up lodging into his body to where the last 6 months of his life it grew into something that collapsed his left lung, and the doctors just couldn't beat it until finally it claimed him. My mom, you know why she's at such high risk of getting respiratory diseases? Is because she picked up a different microbe that's in the Winslow soil. It's called do you remember? No, it's pretty rare. Somehow we have it in our soil and our water. And so last year, she got a cold from one of the kids. The kid had it for 3 days. She turned into something that landed her in the hospital, almost killed her. So what should you do with that information? That we have contaminated soil. It has dangerous qualities. Both my parents' lives are in danger because of Winslow soil or Winslow water. So what do I want you to do with that information? Don't pull your weeds. Don't do yes. Don't do gardening. Don't walk on it. Let's just move out of Winslow, right? Or let's just not breathe whenever it's windy and blowing dirt outside. See how that works for you, because we don't have windy days in Winslow, right? I mean, if your God is not big enough to handle a little virus, be scared of everything. Because there are so many things out there to be scared of. Here's some of the statistics that God gives you in his Bible. I love his statistics. Here they are up on the screen. In their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord determines their steps. That's Proverbs 16:9. Here's Psalm 139:16. All the days ordained or planned for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. Job 42, verses 1-2. Then Job replied to the Lord, I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. Here's some more. Is it not from the mouth of the Most High that both calamities and good things come? What does that say about God's involvement in whether or not there is a COVID-19 virus that we have to deal with? God does as he pleases with the powers of heaven and the peoples of earth. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is a stronghold in my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? Friend, I didn't see any statistics in there. Well, they're more or less implied. For example, here's the statistic on number one of how many minute details in your life fall outside of God's control. 0%. He says you can make all the plans that you want to in your heart, but it's God who determines your steps. What is the percentage of likelihood that your days will be shortened less than what God wants you to live? 0%. He said all your days that I planned for you were written down in your book before one of them came to be. What percentages of other influences can happen in your life that can totally mess up God's purpose for you? 0%. Nothing can mess up God's plans and purposes, according to Job, and he had more misery than anybody. You look at this last one. How many things in your life should you fear? 0%. The Lord is my light and my salvation. He is my stronghold. Whom or what should make me afraid? Now, if you're a Christian, why would we freak out like everybody else is? If we are, our God is too small, and we are not paying attention to these promises that he gave us to encourage us. You know that song that we all sing? I'm sorry, Mike, I gave you the wrong list of, where is Mike? Up there he is. I gave you the wrong list of songs because I totally changed my sermon on Friday. It's like, no, I gotta talk about this. I told him I was going to be speaking about growing in the Word. But I'm glad that I told him that because he picked great songs anyway that we really need to know. Do we believe the promises of God or not? can stand on those promises or not. If we don't, our God is too small. And if that's true and you're a Christian, stop it. Why would you do that to yourself? You know, if we insist on being the center of God's universe, where everything that happens to us is a direct result of what we decide, or the solutions that we can come up with, or the precautions that we can come up with, and God is just kind of responding to whatever we do, man, you have every reason to live in absolute fear all the time, because there are so many things in your life that will happen to you that are completely outside of your control and your planning. But what if you actually believed what God said about himself in these verses? You can live a life with this mindset that says, you know what, for all practical purposes, I'm invincible unless God says otherwise. Because no purpose of his can be thwarted. And if God says otherwise, then I know he has a good reason, because he gave this other promise I didn't put up on the screen, Romans 8:28. All things work together for good, for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. If he does allow me to get some kind of a weird, funky virus, I know he does have a good reason. All 5 days where I feel like I have a really bad cold, he must have a really good reason, because he says he does when I love him and when I'm called according to his purpose. Do you believe it? You know, I got on Facebook the other day, and that's kind of a rarity for me. You know me. Some of you have tried to Facebook, I like get your message like 3 years later. I really feel bad about that. I'm not a Facebook guy, but I was kind of paying attention to some things this last week. And Jim Point posted something from a C.S. Lewis enthusiast that C.S. Lewis said. C.S. Lewis's day, the big fear was we're going to get the atomic bomb. And what somebody did is they took his article that he wrote and they inserted COVID-19 virus in the place of atomic bomb. Or they said, hey, read this in light of that. This is basically what C.S. Lewis said. He said, how are we to live in an atomic age? Or how are we to live in the days of the COVID-19 virus? I'm tempted to reply, C.S. Lewis says, as you would have lived in the 16th century, when the plague visited London almost every year. Or as you would have lived in a Viking age, when raiders from Scandinavia might land and cut your throat on any night. Or indeed, as you're already living in an age of cancer, an age of disease, an age of paralysis, an age of air raids, an age of railway accidents, an age of motor accidents. In other words, do not let us begin by exaggerating the novelty of our situation. Believe me, dear sir or madam, you and all whom you love were already sentenced to death before the atomic bomb was invented. And quite a high percentage of us are going to die in unpleasant ways. It is perfectly ridiculous to go about whimpering and drawing long faces because the scientists have added yet one more chance of painful and premature death to a world which already bristled with such chances, and which death itself was not a chance at all, but a certainty. This is the point to be made. And the first action to be taken is to pull ourselves together. If we're all going to be destroyed by an atomic bomb, let that bomb, when it comes, find us doing sensible and human things. Praying, worshiping together, working, teaching, reading, listening to music, bathing the children, playing tennis, chatting to our friends over a pint of Welch's grape juice, and a game of darts. Not huddled together like frightened sheep and thinking about bombs. They may break our bodies, but they need not dominate our minds. Now, don't misunderstand what C.S. Lewis is saying. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. Don't misunderstand what God is saying in the Bible. I can give you no theological guarantee that the COVID-19 virus is not going to find Winslow. I can't give you a guarantee that if it does come to Winslow, that you're not going to be the ones that happen to get caught in a time of weakness in your health in your life, to where you're going to be one of the 55 people in the entire country that dies from it. But you know what I can also guarantee you? I can't guarantee you that you're not going to have a heart attack tonight. You know that 650,000 people died of a heart attack last year in America? I can't guarantee you that you're not going to get a car accident the next time you get in a car. Do you know that 38,000 people died in car accidents last year in America? Just yesterday, when we were going to Phoenix, we were on I-10. I was telling my young adult class this. There was a car, and he must have had some kind of a stroke or a heart attack or something. Because all of a sudden, he like swerves over into the HOV lane, and then swerves over the entire freeway right in front of us. Like, seriously, 20 feet in front of us, and slammed into the car like 4 lanes over. And that car was able to, I mean, went kind of crazy, but he was able to pull over. I don't know what happened to the first guy, because he was way back there, but they had to shut down the whole freeway. He probably died. My guess is he might have even died before he started swerving. You have no guarantee the next time you get in the car. I cannot guarantee you that because you're a Christian, you're not going to be one of the 38,000 people who dies in a car wreck. So should we just stop all driving? Judging by the parking lot out there, I don't think that's what conclusion you've come to. I can't guarantee you that you're not going to fall victim into one of the thousands of violent crimes that happen in our country every year. I can't guarantee you that you're not going to be the one that falls to H1N1 virus. By the way, why are we talking about that one anymore? It's still there, right? This is what Ted Page was bringing to my attention. It's still out there. We didn't find a cure for H1N1. We're just not talking about it anymore because it's not sensational news anymore. It's not the newest and the latest, greatest thing that will keep you glued to the TV and keep their ratings up. So they just move to something else that's a lot less deadly. I can't guarantee that you're not going to die of a stroke like thousands of Americans did last year. If God wanted you dead, He has a long list of things that He can choose to do it to you. But we're not supposed to be worrying about that. You know, right? That God's focus is not on our comfort level in this life that is filled with sin and corruption and disease and death. His focus for you is on the next life. And He's using this life to prepare you for the next one. And He wants you to use this life to prepare you for the next one. And He also wants you to use this life to try to prepare other people for the next one. You know, I was at a pastor's conference a few years ago, and one of the speakers was Joseph Stoll, who's one of the former presidents of Moody Bible Institute. And he was giving a little history lesson. He says, you know, one of the things that God used to flip the entire Roman Empire on its head for Christ during the days of the early church? He said in Rome, a plague just swept the entire city. And it wasn't a plague like COVID-19. I mean, here it was deadly. I mean, people were just dropping left and right. And so the Romans, they were responding exactly the same we are, and they were panicking. And they were just fleeing the city in droves. And the tragic part of that was they started leaving their loved ones behind to die alone. Sorry, Mom, I know you're 92 years old and you can't get out of bed, you can't take care of yourself because you're so sick. But I only have one life, right? And I don't want to lose it. So I'll put the water where you can reach it, but I'm out of here. I'm sorry, Junior, I know you're only 3 years old and you should have your whole life ahead of you, but come on, I have my whole life ahead of me too. And you don't want Daddy to get sick and die with the same thing that you're sick and dying from, right? So I'm out of here. And so they were just leaving their loved ones when they needed them the most. And here's the miracle that God did. While Romans were fleeing out of the city, like in big long lines of people with their packages of toilet paper tucked into one arm and their bottles of hand sanitizer tucked in the other arm. While they were leaving, Christians were coming. And they had this attitude that said, you know what? Our God is the creator of the universe. We trust Him. We know that He is in control of absolutely everything. And we are going to give Him as much glory as we possibly can with the opportunities that He gives us. So don't worry about your loved ones. We'll take care of them. And they did. They started taking care of all these sick and dying people. And yes, many of the people still died. It was a bad plague. Yes, many of the Christians themselves got sick and they died too. But they had this fearless courage. They had this peace that surpassed all understanding, and people were watching them. Watching them take care of their loved ones that they didn't want to take care of. Watching them put their lives on the line for the sake of their God, and it changed everything. I mean, they basically had this mindset that for the sake of a life that's going to live forever, I'm willing to sacrifice a life that the Bible describes as a vapor. Even if you live to be 120, it's still a vapor in comparison to eternity. And I'm willing to sacrifice this for the sake of that. And their churches blew their doors off. And it changed the most pagan empire in the world. Flipped it on its head for the sake of Christ. All that to say this morning, you gotta choose. You can go ahead and live in fear of everything. That's what you're going to do. If you decide not to fear God, fear everything, because there are so many things out there ready to kill you right now. If you're just going to live in fear of everything, by all means, knock yourself out. Go to Walmart and arm wrestle that person for the very last bottle of hand sanitizer. Or you can decide, I fear God. Therefore, I'm not going to fear anything. I'm going to trust Him, no matter what. You guys can hide under the couch. You guys can run and panic. I'm going to trust Him. I'm going to glorify Him for every opportunity that I have, so that other people in this dark world that's absolutely going nuts, they can see I trust Him. And so they can see this fearless courage and wonder, why can't I have that? And Jen works for a doctor who is not a believer at all. And she was asking Jen, why aren't you scared? How's that for an opportunity? Why aren't we scared? It's not because we're diving our heads in the sand and pretending like it's not real. It's because we trust God. And that world needs to hear that. If this doesn't teach us anything else, we're seeing that world needs to hear that. Are you going to be one of the lights in the darkness? Or are you freaking out along with everybody else? No, it is interesting. I wasn't planning on talking about this today. I just wanted to talk about how you need to grow in your knowledge of Scripture and get closer to God and great stuff like that, because we're working on our mission statement. I was just kind of doing this. I was going to have this like a little public service announcement. Hey, let's not freak out. But the more I study, the more I'm like, we need to know this. And so I'm going to talk about the importance of growing in Scripture. Mike, you're always asking me next week. We're going to talk about the importance of growing in God's Word. But just for today, I want to encourage you by reading with you one last passage that God gave us to encourage us. If you can turn with me to Hebrews chapter 11. We're going to close with this. Hebrews chapter 11, starting in verse 32. This is found on page 1008 if you're following along in your Bible. 1008. Hebrews chapter 11, little number 32. What more shall I say? Time would fail me to tell Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, and Samuel, the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, enforced justice, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, were made strong out of weakness, became mighty in war. They put foreign armies to flight. Women received back their dead by resurrection. Now we like that. We like that part, where God just comes to the rescue and nothing can touch them because they're so invincible. But he keeps going. Some were tortured, refusing to accept release so that they might rise again to a better life. Others suffered mocking and flogging, chains and imprisonment. They were stoned. They were sawn in two. They were killed with a sword. They went about in skins of sheep and goats, destitute, afflicted, mistreated, of whom the world was not worthy, wandering about in deserts and mountains and dens and caves of the earth. And all these, though commended through their faith, they didn't receive what was promised, since God had provided something better for us, that apart from us, they should not be made perfect. Therefore, since we're surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, all those people he just now talked about, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely. Let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. We're continuing to have church services. Ted was asking, should we question whether or not we do like the children's stuff midweek? For now, we're still doing that. If all of a sudden everybody in town is sick, we reserve the right to say, you know what, let's take a break. But I'm not going to do that for the sake of 12 cases in all of Arizona and in the valley. We'll see. But aside from that, we don't want to be dumb. But we don't want to be afraid. People need to see courage. People need to see trust. People need to know that there's somebody who's at the steering wheel of this, and he's not just up there wringing his hands along with everybody else, scared to death of what's going to happen to his children. And they need to see it from you. You trust him? Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, I love you. I'm so grateful that you taught me a very long time ago just how big you really are. How you showed me in your word a very long time ago, good and bad. It all comes from you, all for a purpose. I don't have to live in fear. I just have to live in trust of why did you decide what you decided, and what do you want to do with it in my life, and what's my part I can play. God, I pray that kind of courage, that kind of fearless courage that changes whole nation. I pray for that to be blossoming in the heart of every single person here. That we not be a part of the problem. We can be part of changing the attitudes around us so that we're part of the solution. I pray, God, we do it for the right reason. Because we trust you. God, if there's anybody in here that forget the COVID-19 virus, they're still trying to be at the steering wheel of their whole life and everything. And they're always kind of freaking out with their finances or their jobs or their relationships, to where everything just seems to be out of their control. God, I pray that they too can learn what it means to trust in you. That this morning they just have this mindset that says, you know what, I give up, I surrender. God, I give it all to you. I pray, God, this morning somebody experience that kind of freedom. That kind of weight off their shoulders. That kind of release from anxiety and fear. and that they can live in faith instead. In Jesus' name, amen. We're going to have prayer meeting down here at the front. I'm not going to be one. I don't want to accidentally cough on you. If you have something that you just really want prayer about, if you want to make a decision, okay, I want to follow Jesus, or I want to join your church, I want to be baptized because Jesus tells me to. There's some people here that would love helping me make that decision. But what is the Holy Spirit saying to you this morning? You decide as we sing this final song.
Let's stand together.